California has the most stringent gun laws in the nation, yet has high per capita mass shootings. And California Democrats push for gun control laws that have failed already. Why? Well, my next guest says in part because they base their policies on false statistics. Also, has the FBI been underreporting the number of instances in which civilians use guns for self-defense, sometimes even to stop mass shootings or to minimize the casualties? John Lott is president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, crimeprevention.org. John, don't tell me that lawmakers here in California have been using bad numbers to justify their push for more gun control laws. Say it ain't so.
Yeah, you're shocked. I'm sure you're shocked. Look, I mean, just look at the different types of laws that Biden was pushing when he went out to Monterey Park. He talks about background checks on the private transfers of guns, these so-called universal background checks. It wouldn't have stopped the Monterey Park shooting. It wouldn't have stopped the Half Moon Bay shooting. Wouldn't have stopped the other mass public shooting earlier this year in Los Angeles County either. In fact, it wouldn't have stopped one mass public shooting this century. But the media doesn't ask him. You know, he goes and calls for this, and none of the reporters there ask, you know, either him or his staff, well, would it have stopped the one that you were just talking about? Which ones would it have stopped? You know, you talk about something like red flag laws. California already has that and every other gun control law that Biden was pushing, including the assault weapons ban. And yet, as you say, they have a higher per capita rate of mass public shootings than the rest of the country. Doesn't that kind of ring a bell with anybody? I mean, these are being pushed as somehow the solution for doing it. And we're supposed to follow California. California has a higher rate.
Why do you suppose California has a higher rate?
Well, I think it's in part because of the gun control laws that they have. I mean, you're mentioning the FBI active shooting reports. One of the things that you see when you look at the data properly is that a lot of these active shooting attacks are stopped by citizens with permitted concealed handguns. It's just that's occurring in the rest of the country. It's not occurring in the few states like California that don't issue many permits. Last year, Los Angeles County, where two of these mass public shootings this year occurred, had only one concealed carry permit holder for every 5,600 adults. San Mateo County, where the Half Moon Bay attack occurred, has only one concealed carry permit holder for every 24,000 adults that are there. You look at the 43 right to carry states that are there, and they had one concealed carry permit holder for every nine adults in their states. And so, you know, you can go and attack places in California, and these murderers have like no concern that they're going to run into somebody who's going to be able to go and stop them. If you look at
John, give us some examples where somebody, a lawful permit holder, stopped or minimized a mass shooting.
Well, I mean, on our website, we have since 2000, we have 37 of those cases. But I'll give you a couple that people, I guarantee you, haven't heard anything about. You know, the Pulse nightclub shooting near Orlando, Florida. At the time, it was the worst mass public shooting in U.S. history. 1 week after that, at a nightclub in South Carolina, there was a similar attack. The attacker there had shot 3 people, was shooting at a 4th when that person pulled out his permitted concealed handgun, seriously wounding the attacker and ending the attack. The attacker still had something like 125 rounds of ammunition on him when he was stopped. You know, you will search in vain for finding any type of news coverage outside of the local South Carolina area where the attack occurred there that mentions that a permit holder stopped the attack. What's the difference between the Pulse nightclub shooting and the one in South Carolina? Florida is one of 10 states that ban permitted concealed handguns in places that get more than 50% of their revenue from selling alcohol. South Carolina was one of the 40 states that allowed people to carry in those places, fortunately. Everybody knows about the Parkland shooting. Just a few months after that, at an elementary school not very far away, at a school event at a park next to the school, there was another attack. A man came up, was firing his gun, fortunately, because it was in a park and people were allowed to carry there, you had hundreds of students, you had teachers, you had parents there. A vendor who happened to be at the park and had a permanent concealed handgun was able to stop and seriously wound the attacker before he was able to actually kill anybody that was there. Can you imagine the amount of national and international news coverage that would have gotten if the permit holder hadn't been there to stop the attack? And yet that got no coverage outside of the local Florida market that's there. I can give you case after case. You would think in the Pulse nightclub case, they were still getting national and international news attention a week after the attack when the South Carolina one was thwarted. You would think that there'd be some sensitivity to the media to go and cover that. The Parkland case was obviously still getting coverage, months, still getting discussions, years after the attack that was there. And yet there was no national coverage of the school shooting that was stopped by a permit holder. It's amazing how few times the national media mentions these things. But the problem with California is that they make it so that people can't stop these attacks. They essentially create these gun-free zones by making it so that, last year only very wealthy, politically connected people who gave large donations to the sheriff's reelection campaigns would be getting concealed carry permits.
What's this? The great Aldersky has in his baby brown libertarian fingers a pair of my slippers. These are so comfortable, you're going to wonder why you never got them before. This one's tan, as you can see, but they come in different colors. And if you don't like this style, I don't imagine why, it looks like a 1957 T-bird, doesn't it? There's another style. Just call the number on your screen or go to MyPillow.com, promo code ELDER. And this is the brand new, hot off the presses, MyPillow 2.0, even better than the MyPillow 1.0. 1.0 has been around for 20 years. Now there's new technology. 2.0, even better. Call the number on your screen or go to mypillow.com, promo code ELDER. By the way, there are over 100 products, including the 6-piece towel set. Towels that work, meaning these are towels that actually absorb the water. I don't know if you've noticed this. Go to these stores where they have these beautiful towels and nice colors and they feel fluffy and they smell good, but they don't work. They don't absorb. Isn't that the whole purpose of a towel? These absorb. The MyPillow towel set. Call the number on your screen or go to mypillow.com and use promo code ELDER. Finally, this is the Giza Dream bedsheet. You've never slept on anything more comforting than the Giza Dream bedsheet. As you can see, mine is white because I am the black face of white supremacy, but you're not. You may want a different color. And they come in different sizes because guess what? Beds come in different sizes. Just call the number on your screen. Again, there are over 100 MyPillow products or go to mypillow.com, promo code ELDER. That's mypillow.com, promo code ELDER. John, speaking of a mass shooting being thwarted or damage being minimized by people who are lawfully carrying guns, talk to us about that shooting that took place at that law school in, I think it's called the Appalachian Law School in Grundy, Virginia, where a dean was killed and a professor was killed and a student was killed. And tell us what happened and tell us how the media dealt with that.
Right. Well, you actually had one of the students on your radio show with me after it happened. But what happened was the killer there was shooting. There were two students there, former deputy sheriffs who had gone to lunch and were coming back and heard the shots, ran to their cars, got their permanent concealed handguns out of their cars and stopped the attacker. But, you look at the media coverage after that, the media coverage will mention that they tackled or subdued the attacker. The problem is the reason why somebody was able to tackle and subdue the attacker is that they had already pointed their guns at the attacker there and got him to stop firing his gun. Otherwise, I wouldn't recommend that people just kind of run across an open area without being armed against somebody who is armed.
And they left out the part that these two people that were permitted to have guns pointed their guns at the bad guy. Bad guy stopped shooting. Then they tackled him. The media
right.
just cut to the part about him being tackled. I mean, honestly.
No, exactly. And on your radio show, one of the students said, being a law school student, he had access to Lexis and Westlaw, and so he looked up news stories because he had spent a lot of the day talking to reporters, and he was just amazed that none of them had mentioned that he had used his guns to stop the attack. And so I decided to go and call up the reporters there. I remember talking to one of the reporters, Maria Glad, at the Washington Post. She had like an 800 plus word story on the incident. And she, as you say, mentioned that they had tackled and subdued the attacker. And I was asking her, why is it that she didn't mention, because she had talked to one of the students there, and he had told us that he had mentioned to her that he had used his gun to stop the attack. And I asked her why she didn't include it. And you may remember she said it was because of space constraints. And the bizarre thing is, when you talk to reporters, they're very cognizant of it. Kind of it leads. Right. Man bites dog is more of a news story than dog bites man because it's more unusual. And my question to her was, well, what do you think is going to get more attention? Do you think simply saying somebody tackled the attacker, or that they used their guns to go and stop the attacker? And anyway, it's a conversation didn't last much longer after that. But it was
well, finally, John, let's talk about the number of times Americans use guns for defensive purposes every single year. Years ago, on my radio show, I asked people what they thought. And I got people, one of whom was an engineer, well-educated. He thought Americans use guns for defensive purposes 50 times a year. And I was shocked that that's what he thought. Right. I've heard from you and others the number is substantially higher than that. Let's talk to us about that.
Sure. Well, look, most people get their information on guns in general from news media stories about crime. In 2021, we did kind of a deep dive looking at all the defensive gun use stories that were covered by the media in the country, and you'll find maybe across the whole country about 2,000 news stories. But it's pretty clear that that's an underestimate of the cases. Most of the cases that they cover are instances where somebody's been killed, where the criminal's been killed. In fact, we know that that's less than 1%, way less than 1% of the time that people use guns defensively. They had almost no stories of brandishing, and yet we believe research indicates it's about 95% of the time that people use guns defensively. Simply brandishing a gun is enough to stop a criminal from engaging in attack. But look, I understand why the media would cover that the way they do. If you're an editor of a news bureau and you have two stories, in one case there's a dead body on the ground, in another case, let's say a woman's brandished a gun, the would-be criminals run away, no shots are fired, no dead body on the ground, no crime actually committed because she was able to stop it. You're not even sure what crime would have been committed. I think you or I, as editor of a paper who's trying to get the most interest, would carry the dead body on the ground over the other case. Now, I can understand that from a newsworthiness perspective, but from a policy perspective, both matter. Both types of cases matter. We looked at all the news coverage in the 5 largest newspapers in the United States, the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, the Washington Post, USA Today, and the Wall Street Journal. And between those 5 papers, they had a total of 10 defensive gun use stories. By contrast, they had over 1,700 news stories of crimes committed with guns where somebody was killed or wounded. They had over 2,700 gun crime stories altogether. So this person that you're talking about, this engineer, he may think he's very well read in terms of the news. He reads the major news outlets. He listens to CNN and MSNBC, who, by the way, had 0 defensive gun use stories that year. And he thinks, boy, I follow all this stuff very closely. It's not too surprising that he maybe never hears about defensive gun uses occurring. And that
Now,
affects.
John, there are roughly 30,000 people who are killed every year because of guns. Half of them are suicides. And I think you can
More than
argue reasonably, yeah, more than half. I think you can argue reasonably that a suicide is going to be a suicide, guns or not. So let's look at the 15,000. A criminologist in Florida named Gary Kleck estimates that Americans use guns defensively every year about 1.25 million times. And out of that number, some 30 or 40% believe, but for the firearm, they would have been dead or suffered serious injury. Do you think that's a reasonable number?
I think there are a lot of surveys that have been done that are very similar. And I think they get similar or higher estimates. The average for the different surveys is about 2 million times a year. There's a survey that came out about a year and a half ago by a professor at Georgetown that indicated it was about 1.7 million times. So, I mean, I think there are lots of surveys out there, and I think that's at least gives you a rough idea how it is. But look, just so you get an idea from the news stories, only about 22% of violent crimes are reported to police. And we know that only a tiny fraction of those are reported in the news. I mean, you're talking about, a tiny fraction of 1% of even that 22% are reported as news stories in the news. And so, the notion that somehow, which the gun control groups like the Gun Violence Archive, which, by the way, was caught lobbying the Centers for Disease Control to take off the numbers of defensive gun use estimates from their website, arguing that they should only use news stories, which is what the Gun Violence Archive collects, is just absurd. But, their argument for why it should be taken down was that they were saying having these higher estimates that you and I were talking about regarding defensive gun uses was making it hard for them to go and pass the gun control laws that they want to have. That's not a proper consideration for the Centers for Disease.
Never mind the truth, never mind the facts. We're going to leave it there. John Lott, president of the Crime Prevention Research Center, crimeresearch.org. As always, John, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Larry. Thank you for being there.
Now, I know you love the show, and given that, please hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. We're trying to get our subscriptions up. Give us more clout. And also scroll down a little bit and get on our mailing list to make sure that you get all of our videos and don't miss any. Because every now and then, for reasons that confound us, YouTube apparently has issues with our vids. To make sure you get every single one of them, get on our mailing list. Also, you see that donate button? Hit that. Throw a little something in the tip jar to make sure we can still give you hard-hitting, honest programming. Finally, LarryWithEpoch.com, LarryWithEpoch.com. I am Larry Elder. This is the Larry Elder Show for Epoch Times. Remember, we've got a country to save. I'll see you next time.